Okay.
This at the end. Yeah, okay. So we have a clicker. Good. All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to today's Hinckley Forum. My name is Nick Cockrell, and I'll be our forum host for today. The Hinckley Institute of Politics is a nonpartisan institute at the University of Utah. The Hinckley provides an array of transformative experiences for students through internships, forums, and classes. Hinckley forums seek to foster public discourse and civil debate on the most current and pressing issues, bringing in local, national, and international thought leaders. Today's forum is titled European Democracy Under Threat, and we look forward to hearing a presentation on democratic backsliding and the declining rule of law in Poland. Today's presenter is Mr. Michael Wawrykiewicz. Mr. Wawrykiewicz is a Polish political analyst, activist, and attorney specializing in constitutional law, human rights law, and European law. In 2017, he co-founded the Free Courts Initiative, a think tank and educational center set up to defend the rule of law and raise public awareness about attacks on democratic values in Poland. In 2018, he co-founded the Justice Defense Committee for the legal defense and support of Polish legal professionals targeted by spurious disciplinary proceedings, intimidation, and harassment. He has lent his expertise to international media outlets such as the New York Times, The Guardian, The Washington Post, Le Figaro. In 2022, the International Association of Lawyers awarded the Free Courts Initiative the 2022 Rule of Law Award, and in 2021, the European Parliament awarded the European Citizens Prize. In 2020, the Polish newspaper Dziennik Gazeta Prawna recognized him as one of the most influential lawyers in Poland, and in 2019, he was named Pro Bono Lawyer of the Year. During his fellowship, Mr. Wawrykiewicz is conducting an analysis of the decline of the rule of law in Poland in the comparative context of other cases where populist authoritarians have sought to undermine the judiciary. Now, please join me in welcoming our guest.
Hello, thank you very much for invitation, especially Professor Cotiero. She did it, actually. And I have to admit at the beginning, non-professional remark, that this is the most beautiful place that I've ever been in the United States. I've been in a couple of places, but this is something, because I am a great fan of mountains and skiing and everything what is connected to the mountains. But I am here to bring you to tell you the story about recent 7-8 years and what happened in Poland, actually. And I will tell you that this is a perfect example, actually, of how I'm trying to click it, but it doesn't work. Good. So maybe I will use this. Okay.
There we are.
Yeah, let's go. Because Poland and what happened in Poland throughout the last 7 years is a really perfect example of how relatively stable democracy can be destroyed by the group of autocrats, group of autocrats that has been elected in parliamentary democratic elections, which happened in a history. We have dealt with that kind of situation when even the most horrible autocratic regimes were elected in a democratic, using democratic mechanisms, like Hitler was elected in a democratic elections, and then we know how and what happened. Poland, once look at this list of questions, because when I'm thinking about what happened in Poland and why it happened, I have this list of questions in my mind, and I will try to answer a couple of them today. I will try to answer a couple of them, and I believe that we'll be able to discuss about others. First, I would like to better understand what happened in Poland for the last 7 years. Let's look at the brief review of the recent history of Poland since 1989, because in 1989, the communist era in Poland and in Central and Eastern Europe was finished. And the first country that had free elections, partly free elections, was Poland, not other country. It started on the 4th of June, 1989, the same day when the huge massacre on the Tiananmen Square has been in Beijing. But it was the result, I mean, these first free elections, that was the result of negotiations between the communist regime representatives and the Solidarity movement led by Lech Wałęsa, the great leader of the Solidarity movement. Then he was the president of Poland. But at that time, he sat at the table, the round table with the communists, and they negotiated the deal. And as a consequence of the deal, we had this first partly free election. And as a consequence of this partly free election, Poland was able to bring the first non-communist government in Eastern and Central Europe. What we know as Autumn of Nations happened later on, in November 1989, I mean Eastern Europe, when the Berlin Wall fell, and Romania with the bloody revolution, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and other countries of the Eastern Europe and Central Europe. So it started in Poland. So we have very good traditions of peaceful transition from the communist regime to democracy, to the liberal democracy, to capitalism, and since 1989 we have built a stable democracy. We thought on 2015 that it is complete democracy. We have all the fuses of democracy that protects us. In 1997, very modern liberal constitution was passed by the parliament. It was modeled on the Western democracies. And 2004 is one of the most important and significant dates in the history of Poland, the accession to the European Union, which was the dream of generations. I remember that time, when I was a kid, that was a really dream of my parents' generation, or of my grandparents' generation, to join finally the Western world, the world of prosperity, world of freedom, liberal democracy, and so on. So it finally happened in 2004. Actually, 10 countries from Eastern and Central Europe joined European Union, that community, that gentleman's club, which guaranteed us transformation to the prosperity and liberal democracy. And in 2014, that was also very important, rather symbolic moment when the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, becomes the President of the European Council. That was a signal, that was a simple signal from Western countries that, look, guys, finally you are in our family. Now we can rely on you. You are a real stable democracy. But 1 year later, what happened? 2015, a populist party, perversely called Law and Justice, is coming to power with the democratic elections, and at the same time, president nominated by this party is elected also in democratic elections, is elected as a president. Here you have key political figures of that scene. The most important person is Jarosław Kaczyński, leader of Law and Justice, leader of this party, and he is actually the one who makes decisions, not the president, not the prime minister, not other one, only the leader of the party. So you can see that it works exactly like it worked during the communist era. The president, the chairman of a communist party in each country, in each communist country like Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Eastern Germany, Romania, In each of these countries, leader of the Communist Party was the leader of the country. And they brought exactly the same model. They're trying to bring exactly the same model when the leader of the party is leading the country. The president is a guy who is no charisma man with, which follows orders of a leader of the party. But he is an important person from the formal point of view, from the constitutional point of view, because he has many competences, like signing the bills that are passed by the parliament. So, and also appointing judges, which is very important from the point of view of my presentation, that he is appointing Polish judges, he's promoting Polish judges on the motion of the National Council of Judiciary. So he even has a nickname Pan in Poland because he signs everything. And a third guy, Zbigniew Ziobro, is a Minister of Justice, but what is very important, at the same time, Prosecutor General, because just after they went to power, they joined these two positions, the Minister of Justice political position with the Prosecutor General, who has in his hands the whole prosecutor office, so controls all the proceedings which are starting, which prosecutor office want to start to charge anyone. So he's the one, he's a very important guy, he's a very dangerous guy, vindictive personality. And he's also important from the point of view of my story because he is responsible for all of these amendments and laws in the judiciary. So actually, what happened? We have late 2015 and the beginning of 2016. That is the beginning, and the first serious and dangerous assault on the Constitutional Court. That was the first target. Why the Constitutional Court? Because the Constitutional Court is the special court in Poland, which is designed in the Constitution to protect constitutionality of all laws passed by the parliament. So it actually protects the minority against majority. So if the majority in the parliament want to pass any law which is unconstitutional, then theoretically, according to the Constitution, we have this independent Constitutional Court which can say, no, this is not constitutional, let's get rid of it. But the attack, the assault on the Constitutional Court paralyzed this court within a year. So since the end of 2016, we do not have independent Constitutional Court, which is able to constitutionally check the compliance with the Constitution. How they did it? They did it very brutally, and they did it with impertinence. Just change 3 judges properly appointed to the Constitutional Court with the new ones appointed by them. Of course, those actions were violating the Constitution and violating all the standards of independence of judiciary, but they didn't care, right? They just did it, and they just paralyzed the Constitutional Court. Prosecutor office is what I already said, that this is the situation when all criminal proceedings are controlled by the Minister of Justice, at the same time Prosecutor General. So over the last 7 years, we didn't have even one charge or even one criminal proceedings against someone from the circles of the government, from the leading party. So we have charges only against those who are in the opposition parties or those who are in civil society, in a legal community. This is very important, very dangerous tool in the hands of a leading party in Poland. Public television and radio, public media, this is a huge propaganda machine. They captured this machine at the beginning of 2016, and since that time, we have very powerful propaganda in the public media. It is very primitive. I remember the public television from when I was a kid, from the time of communist regime. It was also a huge propaganda machine, but it was a little bit more sophisticated. Right now, it's so primitive. So glorifying the government all the time, and at the same time, criticizing the opposition, criticizing everyone who opposed the government, and also criticizing European Union as a main enemy of the government. An electoral system, finally, this is also a very important factor of all these changes and the whole story of last 7 years, because they actually capture all the clerks, electoral clerks, and they change electoral law. And at the end of this line, they created the special chamber in the Supreme Court, which is called Public Affairs Chamber. And this Public Affairs Chamber is responsible for acceptance of the result of the elections. So if the elections are somehow, for example, this year we have, in the fall, we have parliamentary elections. So I'm afraid that if these elections are lost by the government, by the Law and Justice Party, this special chamber in the Supreme Court is able to nullify these elections. So that is how it works. But from the point of view of independence of judiciary, the most important year is 2017. That was the time when they passed 3 new laws: the law on the Supreme Court, the law on the National Judiciary Council, and a law on the system of common courts. Why these 3 laws were so important? Imagine that their idea at the beginning, when it comes to the Supreme Court, was to expel all the justices of the Supreme Court. It is horror of the horrors. It's unimaginable in a democratic country, but they did it. They just designed a new law saying that all the justices are expelled. And the Minister of Justice, the guy that I told you about, is going to appoint those who are going to stay in the court. And finally, after protests, they changed it, and they said that only those who are over 65 are going to be expelled from the Supreme Court, including Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. She was in the middle of her constitutional term, 6 years constitutional terms, but they decided to fire her. And National Council of the Judiciary, why is it so important? This is actually the backbone of the Polish judiciary. This is the most important body in the constitution because it is a guardian of independence of judiciary. But at the same time, from a practical point of view, this is the body which is responsible for promotion of judges, for appointments of judges, and they prepare the motions to the president, and at the end, the president signs all the motions from National Council of Judiciary. So this is the body which represents all the branches, the executive power, legislative power, and judiciary. But the most important part of this 25-people council is judiciary's representatives, 15 representatives, but they should be, which is most important, and it comes from the Constitution, they should be elected, appointed by the representatives of the judiciary, by their peers. But what the government did, very simple trick, they changed the law, and they said that these 15 judges inside this council are to be appointed by the parliament, the simple majority in the parliament. So with this simple step, they just politicized this council completely, and the council is subordinated to the government because they have full control over this council. And since that time, since 2018 actually, when it started to operate, this National Judiciary Council, or we call it Neo-National Judiciary Council, is a factory of judges, actually. It produces judges all the time, loyal to the government, not independent, but loyal to the government. In the whole system, we have around 10,000 judges, but they produced, over the last 5 years, 3,000. So almost 1/3 of this system, almost 1/3 of the judiciary are neo-judges, how we call them, so judges who are appointed improperly and who are loyal to the government. This is very important from the point of view of independence of judiciary. This is actually a crucial issue. And when I told you about third law, the law on the system of common courts, they changed a couple of crucial issues when it comes to appointment of presidents of judges. So the Minister of Justice was able to fire them and was able to choose his people on these positions to become presidents of the courts. And a very important factor and very important point, they created disciplinary chamber, a special court inside the Supreme Court, the special chamber in the Supreme Court. We call them Inquisition Chamber, because actually that was the goal of this chamber. The special court, not even subordinated to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, so completely independent but dependent to the government, dependent to the Minister of Justice. Most of the members there were 11 people inside this chamber. They were completely subordinated to the Minister of Justice and the Prosecutor General at the same time. Mostly former prosecutors were inside this chamber, so their role was to repress independent judges, those who are not following the line of the government. So here you have the legal statement, legal claims of the Polish government, because when they realized at that time, 2017, 2016, 2018, that actually the whole civilized world is against them, and all associations of lawyers in the world, all international institutions like Venice Commission, like, of course, European Commission, like Parliament in Strasbourg, like ENCJ, European Network of Councils of Judiciary, like MEDEL, International Association of Judges, like the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations for the independence of judiciary. Every opinions, every expertise were stated that these changes, these amendments in Polish law, and all the actions of the government when it comes to the independence of judiciary, when it comes to the rule of law, are violating international standards, are violating European standards, are violating also our constitution. But they stated that all of these changes, of course, are in line with the constitution and the European standard. They claimed that European institutions do not have a right, do not have a competence to interfere in our internal matters, because this is not the competence of European Union member state. They also claim that Polish constitution has a primacy over European Union law, and that's why they are following the constitution, and that's why they are right. But look at Article 5, because that was their main argument. Article 5 of the Treaty on the European Union, when Poland is a member state of the European Union. And it says that competences not conferred upon the Union in the treaties remain with the member states, which is true. So Poland has a right, and when it comes to shaping judiciary, when it comes to amendments, changes in the judiciary, Poland, as a member state, has a right to do whatever they want, but under one condition. That condition is that the judiciary has to be independent from executive power and from legislative power. That is only one condition that is coming from the European Union and from the standards. This is the Article 19 of the treaty, effective legal protection in the fields of law covered by European Union law, and Article 47 of the Chapter of Fundamental Rights, which provides the right to independent court, which is absolutely obvious standard for the whole civilized world. So, Polish government has a right to shape the judiciary. They have a right to change, for example, how many instances we have in our courts. We have 2, 3, 4 instances, that we have 4, 6, 7 panel judges in the panels in the courts. We have, I don't know, green robes, black robes, yellow robes. This is the competence of a member state, but under one condition, that the judiciary is independent. And this is next argument. that they actually created fake conflict between Polish constitution and international European standards, which is not true, because the standard which is described in the Polish constitution, Article 45, and the standard which is described in the Convention of Human Rights and in the treaties and chapter of fundamental rights is actually the same. Everyone has a right to independent court and independent and impartial judge. So there is no conflict. And what else? The primacy of the Polish constitution over the European law, which is also not true, because the primacy of the European Union law, the supremacy of the European Union law over the domestic law of Poland and other countries and other member states results from jurisprudence of the Court of Justice in Luxembourg. Since 1960s, the first case, very famous case, was Costa versus Enel in 1964. Then we had the case Internationale Handelsgesellschaft in 1970 and Simmental in 1977. These three cases are fundamental for the rule of primacy of the European Union law over domestic laws. Also, when it comes to the constitutional provisions. So everything has to follow European standard, which is very logic argument when it comes to functioning of the European community as a whole. Imagine the situation when all the countries, all 27 states of the European Union have completely different standards. You wouldn't be able to function properly, because European Union is a union of law. This is the frame of the European Union. Without this rule of law, European Union cannot properly exist. And of course, Polish government started very intensive anti-European Union rhetoric at that time, because they realized that they are not following the standards of the European Union law, and actually everyone are against them. So let's look at the question, what has been done when it comes to the Polish society reaction, when it comes to the European Union reaction. Since the beginning, since 2015, and that is a very important factor, one of the most important issues in that battle, that Polish civil society was very active since the beginning. In late 2015, they took the streets, hundreds of thousands of posts in many cities in Poland. In 2017, protests were in 300 places in Poland, everywhere where the court is located. When they brought these three laws violating independence of judiciary, people went on the streets in every place where the court is located. This is the demonstration in front of the Constitutional Court in Poland. Of course, it's a very big demonstration. And at that time, many new organizations were created, like the Committee for the Defense of Democracy at that time. That was a completely new one. They organized this mass demonstration. And also, at that time, the resistance of legal community started, which was a surprise for the government, surprise for autocratic group of people that started to dismantle the democracy, because they thought that lawyers will stay quiet and it will be quite easy to clash them. But it was on the opposite. This is one of the initiatives that started at that time, my initiative, the Free Courts Initiative, which was created, which was founded by 4 lawyers. And this is the core team of this initiative until now. We are, I can say, multitasking organization, because we are doing a lot of things. We're doing educational activity. That's how we started, because when we had these protests on the streets, 2017, we realized that people actually cannot explain properly what is going on, why this is so important, why this independence of judiciary is important for each of us, for each citizen. If you do not have a court case, why is it important for you? And they protested, they shouted, free courts on the streets, but it was really difficult, abstractive issue to understand. So my idea was to start to to prepare short films, very short hypothetical stories with the famous actors to focus attention of people. So we'll be able to hire the most important, important actors on the Polish scene. And they worked for us pro bono, of course. And we prepared many short films with that kind of hypothetical story, that this actor is saying that story. Look, imagine that you are going to the court and you have a court case against the state. You have a court case against the tax office. You have a court case against the member of the parliament who is from the governing party, or his colleague, or the company which is related to the state. And at the same time, this court is appointed by these guys, by the government. Do you think you have a chance to win this case? Of course not. So that was how we started. And then we organized many conferences. We organized also demonstrations on the street. And we are doing advocacy in Europe and also in the world. Because we are traveling a lot, especially in Europe, to European Union institutions and to parliaments of European countries, to European Parliament. We are taking part in hearings. We are bringing these expertise. So we are constantly present in European Union countries to make this advocacy for the rule of law in Poland. And finally, of course, we're doing legal jobs. So we started to defend Polish judges, also justices of the Supreme Court, because the repressions are incredible. So we were able also to found a bigger organization, which is actually a coalition of 13 organizations. And inside we have Amnesty International, we have Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights, we have associations of judges, and My Free Courts initiative. So we are bringing legal defense for lawyers, mainly judges, justices of the Supreme Court, prosecutors, independent prosecutors. We are giving them moral support, but mainly legal support. And this is also the constant pressure on the government to stop their action, to stop these repressions. When, as you can see, we have over 200 proceedings in defense of the Polish judges and prosecutors. It is really difficult to imagine that Polish government is repressing also justices of the Supreme Court. So they are facing not only disciplinary, but sometimes even criminal charges. 2018, that was the turning point. That was a very important moment from the perspective of these proceedings on the European level. Because when they passed these new laws in 2017, at the end of 2017, we realized that we do not have any efficient tool on the Polish ground against them, because Constitutional Court is paralyzed, Supreme Court is paralyzed, so we cannot do anything. So at that time, we started to make a pressure on the European Commission, to travel to European Commission, to discuss with these most important figures, to convince them that now is the time that you have to act, because you have the tools in your hands. Because the European Commission has a tool which is called infringement procedure. That is the most important tool that they have in their hands. This is the case in front of the Court of Justice in Luxembourg. So if any country, if any state, if any member state of the European Union violates these fundamental rights that I'll describe in the Treaty of the European Union, then the Commission can start this procedure. It is three-step procedure. First, they sign the letter, they file the letter to the government, asking not to violate the treaty. Then, if the government do not react, then they prepare this is the second step. They prepare justified opinion, which is actually the instruction for the government of the member state what they have to do to stop the violation of the treaty. And finally, if the government does not react, then they go to the court. So they file the claim to the Court of Justice in Luxembourg. And that's how it happened in 2018. And that was the first very precedential case in the Court of Justice in Luxembourg, based only on Article 19 of the treaty. So based on this effective protection, legal protection rule, which comes from Article 19, it happened actually for the first time, that it was only base of legal base of the procedure in front of the Court of Justice. And it was the case of justices of the Polish Supreme Court, those over 65 that were to be removed from the court. And they filed also the motion for so-called interim measure. An interim measure is a decision of the court in Luxembourg for the time being of the procedure. So until you have a final verdict, it's an interim measure. And they issued the interim measure saying that all those dismissed justices of the Supreme Court can get back to the adjudication, get back to their panels, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is able to finish her constitutional term of office. So that was actually real success, real victory, first efficient step from the European Union institution, together with Polish legal and civil society. Because at that time, I remember when I was in Brussels, I have heard from Vice President of the Commission, Franz Timmermans. He told us, look, guys, you have to do something in your country to support us, to give us the moral support. And at that time, we created the coalition, which was called Europe Do Not Surrender. That was a very broad coalition from left to right. Everyone were on the same page when it comes to the protection of the rule of law. So that was the pressure towards European Commission, start this procedure against Polish government to protect independence of judiciary, to protect Polish justice of the Supreme Court. And it happened. And after that, many cases before both European courts, Court of Justice in Luxembourg and Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg started, and there was an increasing number of these cases right now. Until today, we won around 45 cases in both these courts, certifying that all of these amendments prepared by Polish government were violating European standards. Here you have the picture from the most famous case, AK case. This is a hearing in the Court of Justice in Luxembourg. I had the honor and privilege to be representative of justices of the Polish Supreme Court and to represent them in the Court of Justice. And in that case, the Court of Justice in Luxembourg had two major questions to respond. If this National Judiciary Council that I told you about, which was created by the government, politicized, is it independent body, which is able to appoint judges or not? And second question, if this disciplinary chamber is the court in the meaning of the European Union standard or not? And of course, they created, they prepared, they described the criteria on the basis of the European Union law, saying that this National Judiciary Council is not independent and this disciplinary chamber is not the court. Because preliminary ruling cases working in that way that the court in the member state is able to ask the question to Luxembourg. If they have any doubts about the interpretation of the European Union law, for example, when it comes to these cases, to these two topics, they had doubts, the Polish Supreme Court had doubts if these new provisions are following European Union law. So that's why they asked the question to the Luxembourg, and Luxembourg answered on this question. And on the basis of this ruling, AK ruling, Polish Supreme Court, here you can see 60 justices of the Supreme Court in one courtroom, only those who were properly appointed, because at that time we had already like 25 others which were appointed improperly by this new chamber, new council. So those justices, on the basis of this ruling of the of the Court of Justice in Luxembourg, they confirmed that National Council of Judiciary is not independent, is violating Polish and European Union law. Disciplinary chamber is not a court, and what is, from the practical point of view, important, that its rulings are unlawful. So all these rulings repressing Polish judges are unlawful. And 3, that judicial appointments made by these neo-National Judiciary Council have a legal defect. Here you have a summary of instruments of the European Union law which were used over these 7 years by the European Union institutions. First, Article 7. Article 7 is the procedure provided in a treaty that was used for the first time in the history of the European Union against Poland, and right now also against Hungary, 2 black sheep in Europe. And that proceeding was supposed to be nuclear weapon, that's how they call it. But finally, after 5 years, we know that it is not the nuclear weapon because it's ineffective, completely ineffective, because it is a political instrument. That's why it doesn't work. It's still in the hand of the Council. It was initiated by the Commission. It went to the Council, to the political body, main political body of the European Union, but it's stuck there. So it is not efficient instrument. Second instrument, infringement proceeding. This is what I described. It is somehow efficient. So when it comes to these infringement proceedings that can be started by the Commission, but also can be started by each member state. Each member state that finds that other member state violates the treaty can start these infringement proceedings in front of the Court of Justice in Luxembourg. 3, preliminary ruling proceedings. Those are the proceedings when each court in the member state, as I told you, can ask the question to Luxembourg for the interpretation of the European Union law. This is also very important. And when it comes to these decisions, these judgments of the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, those are the standards for the whole Europe, not only for the one member state, but for the whole European Union. And the new conditionality mechanism, that was the new mechanism, new instrument, new tool, which was designed in 2020 during the pandemic. And the European Union decided to have this new mechanism. So it was passed in the Parliament, in the Council, and finally challenged in the European Court of Justice because Poland and Hungary decided to fight a claim against this new mechanism. But Court of Justice in 2022, at the beginning of 2022, decided that this new mechanism is fully in line with the treaty. So it can work right now. This conditionality mechanism says it is actually the protection of the budget of the European Union. And this protection of the budget is, of course, based on the rule of law. Because if you do not have rule of law in your country, you do not have a proper mechanism to protect the budget, then the budget is threatened. So if money are flowing from Brussels to each of the member states and you do not have independent judiciary, you do not have independent prosecutor office, then the money are not protected enough. So that's why it's this new conditionality mechanism which says that the Council of the European Union can block the funds for each of the states of the European Union. And finally, that was an accidental tool, but very effective as it happened, because in 2020, European Union prepared the Recovery and Resilience Fund, which was post-pandemic fund for the whole Europe, worth 800 billion euros. So that was the kind of Marshall Plan for Europe after pandemic. And for Poland, we were the biggest beneficiary of this plan, we were supposed to get 58 billion euros. But until now, we do not have even €1. Why? Because of the violation of European Union law, because of the violation of the rule of law, of independence of judiciary. That was, and that is still the decision of the Commission, that because of the violation of these fundamental standards, European Commission is blocking these funds. And of course, Polish government is trying and doing their best to get this money, but it's not effective from that side. Because Polish government decided actually to treat European Union as an ATM, having golden card. We can get money, but without fulfillment on any obligations. That was the idea of the Polish government. They cannot just quit the European Union, just leave the European Union, because around 80% of Polish society is supporting the European Union, because it's aware of the value of the European Union. Because of the European Union, since 2004, Polish economy, infrastructure, growth in an unimaginable level. We can look around on the roads, railroads, infrastructures, stadiums, hospitals, buildings, everything. It is built European fund by European funds. So the question, why did it happen and could we prevent it, is very complex. But the main factor is, of course, populism and populist slogans, starting from that ideological slogans like dignity of individual, that the greatness of the nation, that we are a chosen nation, that we are standing up from our knees, and that slogans that we have heard in 30s in Italy or Germany. That are sometimes at the beginning being attractive for the part of the society, that maybe it is worth to vote on them. And very practical populist slogans, like in our case, 500 zlotys for each child every month, directly to the pocket of the parents. So that was for the first time in 26 history of the Polish democracy, when Polish government decided to give money directly to the pockets of people. So that was the argument. And of course, at the same time, anti-European rhetoric, because the Polish government is very traditional, very Catholic, very conservative. So everything which was brought by the European Union and coming from the European Union was bad. All the new ideas were designed as leftist ideas, actually bringing our sovereignty of Poland and taking our dignity off from our nation, and so on, so on. And when it comes to judiciary, judicial system, to be honest, of course, it was not so modern. And usually people are complaining for the judicial system. They are not finding it as functioning well. And half of clients of courts are losing their cases, so they are not finding courts as a fair institution. So, of course, at that time, people wanted a real reform of the judiciary, and that was also the fuel for the governing party. They promised to bring the society, real reform of the judiciary. Of course, they didn't do that. And what turned out to be the most effective during that story, during that battle, of course, the most effective were European Union institutions. European Union and the Convention on Human Rights was and is still the biggest and the most effective shield that we have as citizens, as a civil society, as a legal community. And that is not efficient enough, of course, unfortunately. So the European Union is not able to stop all these actions in Poland, in Hungary. They are not able to do that. but they can stop some actions, and we were able to gain some victories during that time. And a combined activeness of the civil society, combined with the actions of the European Union institutions. So, as I told you, Polish civil society is still very active and was active from the beginning, what was really, really important. And that is the difference between Poland and Hungary, unfortunately. Because unfortunately, it is a very sad conclusion that Hungarian society is rather quiet and rather not active, rather passive. And the legal community is completely passive. They are not doing anything to resist. And when it comes to Polish legal community, I have to admit the courage of Polish judges, mainly, and Polish independent prosecutors. They are facing many disciplinary proceedings. They are facing other repression. They are facing sometimes criminal proceedings. Of course, tax office controls and many that kind of repressions. Because we are still in the European Union, they cannot imprison them, and they cannot repress them in a harder way. But these repressions are making so-called chilling effect, because when a regular judge sees his colleagues facing all of these repressions, he thinks, when he's issuing independent decision, he says, oh, maybe I will follow government orders and then I'll be safe. So that is how it works. But we have a lot of very brave judges who are issuing still independent decisions. I had the very good example of the case. I was representing the professor of law, of constitutional law, Wojciech Sadurski. He is right now at the Yale University. And he tweeted 2 years ago that Law and Justice Party is working like an organized criminal group. So he was sued. And he charged. He had charges in the court. So I represented him. I defended him, and we won that case. Which means that we still have independent judges inside the system that are able, that they are brave enough to issue independent decision. Of course, after that, they are facing disciplinary proceedings. They are facing other repressions, but they are still brave enough to do that. And fourth factor, good communication of the rule of law topics. I will show you at the end of this presentation maybe one of our films, of our film productions that we are doing to communicate these rule of law topics. As I told you at the beginning, it is not easy to communicate it because it is an abstractive issue and nobody understands what is going on with these courts. At the beginning, in 2015, nobody knew what is the Court of Justice in Luxembourg, what is the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg, or even what is the Constitutional Court in Poland. That was not so easy. Why we are defending these institutions. So this is our initiative, the Free Courts Initiative. Look what we are doing. We prepared nearly 1,000 short films during that time, coverages. We reached very wide audience. Sometimes our films were watched by several million people in internet. We managed to build good relations with mainly artistic people from an artistic world, like filmmakers, actors, also journalists, lawyers, doctors who are cooperating with us, who have famous faces and are delivering these messages through the films. We were also able to reach these most important figures in the European Union. What is also very important, because at the beginning, when we knocked to their doors, we were nobody. So they did not know who we are. And at that time, after a couple of years, they know that we are reliable people, that they can count on us, they can rely on us, and we are preparing expertise for them. We are good advisors when it comes these complex issues of the Polish judiciary, Polish rule of law. So we were also able to manage some of the institutions. We are cooperating with the American Bar Association very closely. The American Bar Association presidents were traveling to Poland several times, watching what is going on in Poland, inspecting what is going on. They prepared several opinions on that issues, which are very useful. So this is the scope of our activity. And one of the last questions is, can we restore the rule of law in Poland in the future? Because I believe that we'll be able to liberate this year after the elections in the fall, in October. And after that time, there will be, well, very, very difficult and a hard goal to restitute the rule of law in Poland, and to rebuild the independence of judiciary, to rebuild the trust for the judiciary. You know, if we have 3,000 judges inside the system who are improperly appointed, and all of them are issuing decisions every day, this is a really huge problem for the judiciary. So 1 year ago, we another time created a coalition of civil society, which was called Agreement for the Rule of Law, and we prepared the draft legislation. The draft legislation on those main topics, like the National Judiciary Council, like the status of neo-judges, like the status of their judgments. This is all described in this legislation. And we were able to convince the opposition parties to unite all of them and to file this draft legislation to the parliament. Of course, it was rejected by the majority, by the ruling majority, but it doesn't matter. It exists. It's ready to be submitted in the future. And we have to take care also after about real reform of the judiciary. This is something what the society needs mostly, to modernize our judiciary, to make it more friendly for the clients of court, and so on and so on. And what are the lessons from this story for others? I think that the most important issue is that we have to, everywhere where the democracy is threatened, we have to react very quickly, very firmly. Because I remember 2015, 2016, many people, many influential people, journalists, lawyers, politicians, or activists, they were saying, maybe let's not over-exaggerate. Maybe it's not such a terrible issue. Let's wait, let's give them a chance. So we gave them a chance. So we can see what happened. So if we react at the beginning, if we see first symptoms of destruction of the democracy, of these fundamental issues, we have to react immediately. And then, of course, we have to build and we have to take care of the civil society. Civil society is the most important when it comes to the reaction on the violation of the democracy. What else? You have to protect, of course, on the democratic institutions. We have to modernize them all the time, because it happened that last year, in 2021, I was in Groningen University in Netherlands, where Professor John Morin, he's a big friend of us, and he's very much involved in the protection of the rule of law in Poland. He organized the Rule of Law Festival at the university, together with students, together with judges, together with activists, lawyers. And one of the most experienced lawyers, very famous lawyer in Netherlands, asked me a question. Do you think it cannot happen here in the Netherlands? And I said, no, it's not possible. It's such a stable democracy. It's a strong democracy. It cannot happen. He said, no, you are not right. It can happen also here in Netherlands, because we also have populists, and they can win the election one day, and it can happen also in that kind of place like Netherlands. So we have to take care of all democratic institutions every day. So it's not granted forever. So that is the final conclusion. And education of young generation. That is also very important. We are delivering, as a Free Courts Initiative, the program for kids, which is called Constitutional Week. And the Constitutional Week is a program every half a year. We are going to schools in the whole Poland. Around 500 lawyers are working pro bono and delivering lectures for kids in schools for around 50,000 kids every time in the whole Poland. And we are talking about the Constitution, these main values, and this is very interesting, and the reaction of the young generation is awesome, that they are so much interested in these topics. And so the education of the next generations is very important when it comes to the protection of the rule of law. And at the end, I will show you one of our films that is actually the metaphor of how, could you help me please, because I'm not sure if I can work with this. Yeah, I can. I do this. Look at this.
It's not one moment.
This is a soccer game. It should work.
Should. All right. You should be good.
No, no sound.
Nie na wolne pole, ale skuteczna interwencja i od autu wznowią grę zawodnicy w białych koszulkach. Ładne rozegranie. Tymczasem rywale wyprowadzają swoje piłki. Jedna piłka z prawej, druga z lewej. Atak obydwoma skrzydłami. Sędzia słusznie stosuje przywilej korzyści i gol! 2 naraz! To są te indywidualne zdolności! Czarne koszulki idą za ciosem, przechwyt. Na powtórce widać brutalne uderzenie w twarz. Oj, dyskusje z sędzią mogą ich słono kosztować. Szarża białych zaraz wyjdzie sam na sam, ale niestety pułapka offside'owa. Tu nie potrzeba waru. Może teraz stały fragment gry, a w murze wszystkich 12 zawodników, no nie wygląda to ciekawie. Tymczasem mamy zmiany. Na boisku pojawi się powiew świeżości. I po co było tak szaleć? Czy biali mogą to jeszcze wygrać? Co tu się dzieje? Może teraz szansa dla białych koszulek na zmianę rezultatu. Niestety nie ma bramki. Nie ma bramki, proszę państwa. Bramki nie ma.
Tato, o co w tym chodzi?
To normalne, że was to dziwi. Trudno zrozumieć taką grę bez zasad. Ten mecz wygląda tak jak walka o demokrację i praworządność w Polsce, którą my, obywatele, prowadzimy od 2000 dni.
Wciąż gramy, chociaż przeciwnik oszukuje i fauluje, ma władzę i komentatorów. Nie poddajemy się, gramy pressingiem, dryblujemy i mimo wszystko wciąż strzelamy bramki.
Oni na razie mają przewagę, ale to po naszej stronie są zasady i przyszłość. Nie pozwól, żeby wygrały czarne charaktery. Włącz się w mecz o wszystko.
Razem możemy go wygrać!
So the last comment is that sometimes you have to use completely different tools to convince the society. This is one of these tools. You have to communicate these complex issues, for example, in that way, as a metaphor of a game which violates all the rules. This is also, my impression is that this is a responsibility of lawyers when it comes to the destruction of democracy, when it comes to the destruction of the rule of law. We lawyers are responsible because we know where it leads to. And so we are the ones that can react at the beginning. So that's why we started our initiative, and that's why we changed our lives. 7 years ago, I was a commercial lawyer, regular commercial lawyer, having my law firm and not dealing with the public issues. Right now, I'm 100% focused on these public issues, and right now I'm doing only this stuff. So, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
And if you have a question, I'll run you the microphone just so our folks on the live stream can hear.
So you mentioned towards the end to be careful regarding, or you said specifically in the slideshow, to react quickly and decisively against threats to democracy. Would you suggest that corrupt parties will be elected sort of as an inevitability of free democracy? Or is there more at hand? Was there any underhanded means of winning this election, or was it just sort of luck of the draw that the Populist Party was instated into the government?
So maybe let's go with, do you have any other questions?
First, I'd like to thank you very much for your very clear and effective presentation today. But even more, I think we would all like to thank you for the efforts that you have been making for the protection of and restoration of rule of law. It's a very impressive and valuable continuation of Polish traditions of civil society activism.
Yeah.
My question might be a little bit tied to the first question, which is this question of explaining the continued re-election of Law and Justice in the past. You've discussed, you told us about some of the appeals, some of the issues that it's run on, especially the populist economic policy. But political strategy and political organization play a role as well. And I wondered if you had anything, particular opinions, ideas about how the previously divided and often incompetent Polish right, the Polish right wing, learned lessons from the past, what they started doing differently from 2015 on, and whether you see this, to what extent this depends on the figure of Jarosław Kaczyński, and whether you see it going differently once he's gone.
Mm-hmm. Well, when it comes to why they were elected again in 2019, because they were elected again in 2019, and also why President Duda was elected again in 2020, the answer is that first, of course, their populist slogans are working still for the part of society. And they changed the electoral system. And the electoral system is right now in their hands. So we do not have, we maybe have kind of free elections, but we do not have fair elections. That is what changed from 2015 to 2019 and 2020. So the very good example is in 2020 when we had presidential elections during the pandemic. They should not be organized in the middle of pandemic, but they were, because Law and Justice Party realized that they have to organize very quickly these elections, otherwise they can lose. And the party and the state delivered so many social transfers to the society. They delivered so many benefits to the municipalities. They promised so many things to the municipalities. They had incredible propaganda in the television, which was like a party channel. So the electoral campaign was not fair, was not founded fair, because they had this huge advantage when it comes to financial issues in the political, in the electoral campaign. So, as I said, the elections were not fair. And at the end, when incumbent President Duda won the elections with a very, very small margin, 200,000 votes. We had 30 million voters and 200,000 votes was the margin. So 6,400 protests were sent to the Supreme Court, to the special chamber of the Supreme Court. I was representing, like, I don't know, 200 people from all over the world, also from here, from the United States, because Polish citizens can vote also abroad. So I have that ton of papers in my office when it comes to these protests. And all of these protests, even if they were justified, they were rejected by this chamber in the Supreme Court, because this chamber is fully staffed by loyal people to the government. So this is one of the answers for the question why they won the elections again, because they won not in a fair elections. Also the electoral system, the DONT system that we have in Poland, that promotes big parties. If you, in 2015, Law and Justice had 37% of votes, and they had 51% of mandates in the parliament. So that's how it works. That's another question, another answer. And if Jarosław Kaczyński and the right wing, they learned something from the past, of course they learned that you have to be very primitive, that you have to be populist, you have to deliver very simple ideas, that you have find an enemy at the end. This is the way how to divide the society. Our society is so much polarized right now. We are like two tribes, actually. I'm reading right now a very interesting book of Ezra Klein, Why We Are Polarized. I strongly recommend you to this book. This is not happening only in Poland, it's happening everywhere, this polarization. So these mechanisms are the same. So we are so much polarized because Jarosław Kaczyński was able to find an enemy. He has a lot of enemies, and always before the elections, he finds another enemy. The European Union is an enemy. LGBT society is an enemy. Left-wing parties are enemies. And everyone who opposes the government and their ideas is an enemy. So to find an enemy and to convince the society that you have to unite around him to fight against the enemy, it's a good idea to win the election. But what is also a very important factor is that economy is always the best an argument. And right now, Poland is in a very bad economical situation. The inflation is around 20%, and the prices of energy, of gas, of fuel are incredibly high. So it also influences the minds of the society. So I believe that will be also the factor that works against the government and that will allow the opposition to win the election. What else? Can you remind me? Do you have my answer, or do you need any?
I just, sort of in regards to a free democracy, I just want to, sort of in regards to a free democracy, I want to understand is a corrupt party being elected, is that an inevitability that happens with a free democracy, or were there more underhanded tactics to become elected in which they started to change the judicial system and things like that?
Of course it is easier because, as I said, it's easier to win the elections when you have the whole power in your hand, especially if you have independent judiciary, because always independent judiciary is actually the only protection for citizens against the government. If you do not have We realized throughout the last couple of years that if you do not have independent judiciary, if you do not have independent courts, you do not have any other protection against the government. They can charge you for anything, for fake charges, and you're responsible. So they were able, for last 7 years, to capture everything, every democratic institutions, to turn off all of these fuses that protects us. So right now they are able to win any elections, or even if they have in their hands this special chamber and other instruments, other tools, they can nullify the election that they will lose. I expect that any way we cannot expect a smooth transition of power this year in the fall. Maybe we'll face our 6th of January in Poland. I don't know. Anything can happen. But what is, for me, what is absolutely obvious that this government, after 7 years of government, they will not be. They want to stay in power, so they won't be able to just transit power to the opposition.
We have time for maybe one, perhaps two more questions. So we'll go over here.
Thank you. I have a two-part question. The first is in regards to the catalyst that the populist movement in Europe came to power in 2015 of the refugee crisis, the Syrian refugee crisis. I'm curious if something similar is happening just in the opposite direction right now with the influx of Ukrainian refugees. I know there's a shared historical occupation by the Soviets between the two countries, so there is that shared history, but I'm wondering if you're starting to see a political change more towards the opposite direction. And then the second question is, it's my understanding that the European Council, you have to have unanimity on the Council in order to bring law and justice, or not law and justice, but rule of law charges against a member state. And is there any mechanism that so long as Hungary and Poland are in power and in position to help one another out, is there any legal mechanism that can supersede that you all are trying to pursue from the European level?
When it comes to refugees and the Ukrainian war, it's a very good point. It's a very good question, because, but it's a completely different situation from 2015. Right now, the Polish government, of course, they can use the argument of the war, but they cannot use the argument of the refugees crisis when it comes to their politics. Because Polish government, in their narrative right now, are very pro-Ukrainian. And they were using this argument since the beginning of war in relations with the Commission, with the European Union, and also with the United States administration, saying that, look, guys, we have a very serious war and we have an enemy at the borders, so let's forget about these bullshits of the rule of law. So that is how they try to convince the Commission. The rule of law is not important when we have a serious war. And finally, so we were traveling at that time to Brussels many times to discuss with these main figures and to convince them, no, it's on the opposite, because you cannot feed another autocracy inside the European Union borders. Because the example of Ukraine, the example of Russia and Ukraine, shows very clearly where it leads to, the destruction of the rule of law. Putin destructed rule of law in Russia for 22 years, and now he's able to do what he's doing. And I don't know if you have heard what Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, she said in Princeton University in November, I think, very significant words, that she said that Polish society is behaving absolutely phenomenal, properly when it comes to the Ukraine, to the aid, to the refugees crisis. But at the same time, Polish government is not fulfilling these rulings of the European Court of Justice. So they have to be punished for that. So that's why we are blocking funds. And let's not match these two issues. So let's not match these two issues. Ukrainian war is one thing, and the preservation of the rule of law is another one. But if you're asking another question about the effective mechanism, as I told you, there is no one effective mechanism, because when you say about unanimity, you are saying about the Article 7, do you? The Article 7, that's why I told you that it is not effective. It was supposed to be a nuclear weapon, but it is not. In the past, when this mechanism, this procedure was designed in the 80s, actually, after Greek accession to the European Union, because European Union countries, Western countries, were afraid at that time that after their autocratic experiences in Greece, it can be dangerous with their accession to the European Union. That's why they designed this Article 7 mechanism. But previously, at the beginning, when it was designed, the Court of Justice was supposed to be the one who decides, the judicial body, not the political body. Right now, unfortunately, it's in the hand of the Council, and it needs the election, the voting in the Council. So that's why it is ineffective. But Europe needs another tools. Conditionality mechanism is the one, but it is not also fully effective. So European Union is working on another tools, to find another tools to protect against that kind of actions like Polish or Hungarian government. I also heard many informal debates inside in Brussels about how to expel Hungary from the European Union, even if it is not possible right now under the treaty, because the treaty does not provide that kind of procedure. You can only decide to leave the European Union as a member state, but the European Union institutions has not have right to expel you from the European Union. But anyway, I believe that this time and the experiences with Hungary and Poland will be kind of vaccination for the European Union for the future. So they will be able to know how to react in the future, how to react on that kind of actions like Polish or Hungarian government provided. And I also believe that European Commission and European Union institutions realize right now that this is a very critical moment for the whole integration. We have 70 years of the integration of the European Union, and they realize that that was a good time for Europe, the time when we didn't have even one war inside the borders of the European Union. And if the European Union institutions will let that governments like Polish or Hungarian to destroy the whole frame of the European Union, which is the rule of law, that can be the domino effect for other countries, because other countries are in line, like Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia, or even Italy, or even France, where the populists are and can win election one day. So that is a very critical moment, and I think that they realized finally that they are responsible to stop this process of violation of the rule of law inside the borders of the European Union. We'll see how it works, but they are trying.
And with that, I want to be considerate of everybody's time, because we are nearing the end of our hour. So if you could please join me in thanking our guest for such an insightful and important discussion. And thank you for joining us. This was amazing.
Thank you very much for being here and discussing with me. I'm staying. If you want to discuss with me individually, I am available.